And I see now
मुझे तुम लोग अपने बच्चे चाहिए.
Tisha. Hi Tisha.
Veena Mercy's granddaughter.
Hey, अरे Veena की.
And this is
Tara
Vaishali's
and
son.
Tisha.
Oh,
Yes, on the top line of the stars of my show.
So you are a very sweet boy. Okay.
Hello,
Let's
Siddharth.
see you.
Sweet daughter.
Vaishali, let's see you. Unless you're, even if
Hello,
you're in your
Siddharth.
pajamas, it's okay. It's early morning there.
अरे बेटा तुम लोग ऐसा करो एक बार all of you come here.
Good to see you, Vaishali.
Hi. Oh my God, I haven't. Let me remove my hi.
Hi Vishali.
Hi Vishali.
Hello.
Hi, Vaishali.
Hi, Vaishali.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Where is Veena ji?
कैसे भूल सकती हूँ?
Hello Veena ji.
How can I ever forget you?
Veena ji.
Hello, Gogi.
Hi.
Chaliye.
And my
Your call whenever.
Your tea is here.
Come and have a cup of tea.
A few minutes, a couple of minutes. On what?
Sorry?
No.
Another minute or two.
Okay, another minute or two. Okay.
Arjun, please make your appearance. Do you require a... Yeah, he is.
Namaste.
Namaste.
छोटे बच्चे भी करने लगे.
Vishubai and Bhabhi, show me how much weight you've lost. Vishubai and Bhabhi, show me how much weight you've lost.
He's showing.
ये कौन सी
Showing
बेटी
his
है?
collar.
Sure.
I know her.
Vishu Mama, you're on a diet?
Yeah, he's training. He's got a trainer.
You're
wow.
tempting me to do a dabang, Puna.
Hey, he's lost weight. Yeah, both of them have lost weight.
Vishu Mama, ho jaye. Come on.
Arey, come on, yaar.
Sure, do the striptease. Vishubai,
Are
striptease.
you
Show
nuts,
us
Poonam
striptease.
Kansal?
Striptease.
Believe me, everybody would love it.
Hello, my Kit Kat.
Hello. Hi, Kitty Masi.
भेज दो तो मनी किटकैट
हैं?
पार्सल से भेजो किटकैट.
हाँ, भेज देंगे. चलो, done. But by the time it reaches you, it will all be liquid.
I hope the younger generation, some of them are joining because, as I said, the stars of my show are Gen 4.
Yeah.
Jay is there. Rohan is there.
Rohan is there. That's because his Nani.
Madhur Mami, you are the star. Madhur Mami, you are the star of this show.
No, not at all. My
You work so hard.
My 3 stars are there, Tisha, Tara and Siddhant, and we're really looking forward to them. And the rest of us are just props to support them from behind.
राजू, तुम्हारे आम खत्म हो गए कि चल रहे हैं अभी?
नहीं भैया, अभी बस they are on the last 7 or 8 only.
You've got a full orchard, Raju, and we see all the products and we're envious like hell.
Yes, I do have an orchard thanks to my Papa ji who was very fond of these things. अब बेचारे नहीं रहे लेकिन the fruits are there, तो अच्छा लगता है.
His fruits are there, that's right.
राजू देख के लालच आता है, पता है तेरे पास पहुंचने के लिए.
नमस्ते वीना जी.
Hi Veena Didi. Hi Veena Didi.
सब लोग इतने चुप हो रहे हैं कि समझ ही नहीं आ रहा है कौन है.
Namaste, Veena Masi.
Hi,
Madhur, Nitin is also there. Nitin.
Nitin unfortunately had to drop out at the last minute.
Oh, I see.
I think the kids were something to do with the kids.
Okay.
So very disappointed because he's so eloquent and he knows so much.
I've seen him perform. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, how I discovered it was I was invited by CII to a webinar. And I joined about 3 or 4 minutes late, And when I joined in eventually, who do I see on screen speaking very knowledgeably and eloquently on air pollution, but Nitin Prasad. And then I discovered afterwards that Nitin actually heads a lot of coalitions and consortiums on air pollution, is working very, extensively on it. So he was absolutely gung-ho, and he sent such a brilliant presentation, but nobody can present that presentation except for him. There's so many graphs and pies and things like that none of us can. But so we're very disappointed.
We'll catch him in season 2.
We'll catch it. So I said we'll save it for another time.
Yes, of course.
Good
I
idea.
think we should get going. Should we do that?
Yes.
I think so. So everybody, please mute yourself, and Chand, please take over.
Okay, so good evening, folks. It's really lovely to be part of what I call a bridging session between season 1 and season 2. So today's session is on the environment. All of us have heard and read a lot about what's going on, and there are terms that we hear like climate change, like sustainable development goals, like net zero, carbon footprint, and all of that. So today, the session is going to demystify some of these things and tell us a lot more about what's going on in the environment. The session is titled Ecosystem Restoration, Build Back Better. So let me quickly introduce the speakers for this evening's session. So the coordinator and the lead is Madhur Das from Gen 2. Madhur Das started working at 20 and is still working at 70. Her career span can be divided into 3 phases. First 12 years, she was a teacher. Then for 8 years, she was a film producer with Trisha, her daughter, as a director. Together, they made up to 40 documentary films. They won the President's National Award in 3 categories for the Best Film, Best Director, and Best Music. Madhur worked in Doordarshan as an anchor on DD3 for a few years. In 2005, she joined WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, and was Director, Conservation Alliances for 9 years, and then was an ambassador for WWF. She's currently a senior consultant at United Nations Environment Program and is steering the session today. She graduated from Lady Shri Ram College, got her Bachelor of Education from CIE, Delhi University, went back to university in her mid-40s to complete a postgraduate diploma in mass communication. So that's Madhur Das. Our next speaker is Ranu Das. He's worked for 49 years, of which 45 years of project delivery experience in over 20 countries and 4 continents. He's pioneered the vision and development of multidisciplinary and multi-domain mega projects, introduced path-breaking technologies in core areas, developing solutions for tomorrow in a sustainable and ethical way. He's a regular speaker at global conferences, universities on technology and sustainable urban mobility and infrastructure. He's an executive council member of the erstwhile Copenhagen-based Green Growth Leaders, the only one from India and one of the 3 from Asia. At Green Growth Leaders, he led sustainability discussions with 300 global mayors twice every year for 4 years, with a special emphasis on energy use. The third speaker is Devendra Singh, better known as Devi, also from Gen 2, a civil servant by profession and nature plus wildlife lover by passion. He's an avid ornithologist and a lepidopterologist. Let me say that again, a lepidopterologist. By the way, that I Googled that because I didn't know what that meant. It's the study of moths and butterflies. He devotes his weekends to bird watching and nature tracking. He's published articles on nature, and his nature pictures adorn several journals. Has Delhi roots over 900 years. Wow. By profession, he's a transport, multimodal, and logistics expert with the Indian Railways. The next set of speakers on the program are from Generation 4. And these are today's youngsters. Siddhant Sinha, Gen 4, founded Sun Foundation, an organization with a mission to educate students in Delhi NCR about climate action through advocacy clinics after witnessing the grave air pollution crisis in Delhi. In addition to that, he has also written several articles on the climate emergency. For his efforts, Siddhant was selected to be a Forbes Teenpreneur. Siddhant is currently a senior at Phillips Academy, Andover, where he heads the Climate Cafe program and invites experts in climate policy, science, and justice to talk to students and faculty about specific climate-related issues. At Andover, he's also the captain of the squash team and the president of the Andover Economic Society. Welcome, Siddhant. Tara Doraiswamy, Gen 4. Tara is in her first year at Ashoka University and is majoring in psychology and planning to minor in biology. She enjoys sport and is now pursuing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She also has an interest in graphic design. Tisha Doraiswamy, her twin sister, Tisha, is a first-year economics major at Ashoka University, planning to minor in environmental studies. She's had a passion for animal rights for several years and hopes to pursue a career in furthering environmental justice. She's currently a member of the Yugma Network, a youth initiative that works towards achieving ground-level environmental justice and raising awareness for environmental issues. So welcome Siddhant, Tara, Tisha to this session. And with that introduction, I have pleasure in handing over to Madhur Das to anchor today's session. Over to you.
Thank you, Chand. Well, hello, family, good evening, and namaskar. So Ran has been told several times to ask Madhur to speak on environment. And considering that actually I worked with the two most prestigious and leading organizations for over 14 years in the field of environment, first with the World Wildlife Fund for about 10 years, and now with United Nations Environment Program for 3.5 years since it started. So I guess the ask is justified. So here I am, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. So for starters, if I may, I'd like to make two quick observations. The first is that environment is a very vast sector to speak about, and any one aspect of environment is closely linked to another, and it would be incomplete to speak on any one. For example, as Chand mentioned, climate change links to air pollution, crop burning, land degradation, to health and environment, to the COVID pandemic, then on to waste management like medical waste, which Tisha will be talking about, to single-use plastics, to marine and riverine litter, and so on. Secondly, environment today is very science and research and technology based, which includes artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, data collection and analysis, reports, fieldwork, training, toolkits, and so on. It's very, very technical. I remember when I was in WWF, in the Secretariat, there were about 100 staff members at that time. I'm talking about 2005 to 2014. And out of which 35 were PhDs. And I remember asking one of my colleagues, so what have you done your PhD in? So he said in chemical and hazardous waste. So I said, oh, that's very interesting. So he said, no, but my specialization is on the impact of DDT. So it can't get more technological than that. But I'm not a technical person. So I think it makes sense at this time for me to briefly share what my expertise is in the field of environment. I have worked with, as I said, with WWF and UNEP, forging and steering partnerships, alliances, and outreach to support, finance, and enhance the work on environment nationally and internationally. This has been with these associations and partnerships have been with business and industry, development agencies, NGOs, private donors, consortiums, coalitions, individuals, and so on, but very specific to working in the field of environment and striving very importantly towards achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals declared by the United Nations. These SDGs are like sacrosanct for us. They're the thread that runs through all our work. And they're very important as they lay down the guidelines and bring consistency and commonality in the work on environment globally. So to give you an example of the work that I do, I've recently forged a partnership with a large corporate to support UNEP forming an air quality action forum and a solution center. This is to bring the multifarious coalitions and consortiums and organizations, and there are many who are working on air pollution mitigation. As we know, it's a very critical issue today. And to bring it all under one umbrella to collaborate on a common platform and streamline the work undertaken, so that there's some sort of a commonality. Otherwise, there's so much research and there's so much work which is going on in air pollution mitigation, but it has to have some kind of a consistency along in the global scenario. And therefore, the Air Quality Action Forum intends to do that. And most importantly, also support the government's NCAP, that's the National Clean Air Program, which is, again, India, spans India. Another quick example of what I do is I work very closely with an environmentalist called Afroz Shah. Many of you would have heard about him. He single-handedly started cleaning the Versova beach. And today, of course, he has thousands of volunteers, and he has the support of the government and also influencers like Amitabh Bachchan and Aditya Thackeray. So Afroz once asked me, Madhur, what do you think is the largest plastic litter that the tide brings in on the beach every morning? So I said, so Afroz, what is it? So he said, it is Amul milk plastic pouches in which the milk is, and the horrible little sachets that you get of Fair and Lovely, Rajnigandha, and the shampoos, which are highly unbiodegradable. And so this idea kind of stayed with me. And one of the partnerships that I forged was with CII. Along with CII and WWF, we formed a consortium which now has 20 CEOs of leading corporates on it, called the Unplastic Collective. And the CEOs have all pledged to work towards phasing out single-use plastic within their specific industries. And some of these corporates are like Hindustan Lever, Procter & Gamble, Haldiram, IKEA, Tata's, Amul, of course, and many others. So, what's happened to mine? So when I was asked to speak about environment, I kind of got my head around it and did what I'm sometimes known to do, which is go off the beaten path, and decided to do and chose a title called Ecosystem Restoration. And I chose this for 3 reasons. And I've divided this session into 3 segments. The first, of course, is United Nations launched the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration from 2020 to 2030. I'm going to call it ESR. And this is a rallying call for the protection and revival of ecosystems all around the world. And of course, it's for the benefit of people and nature. And what's very important, as Chan mentioned, that environment is such a huge sector, and he mentioned all the sectors that come under it. So the ecosystem restoration is an overarching call for action, which covers all aspects of environment. It's only with a healthy ecosystem that we can enhance people's livelihoods, focus on circularity, green economy, counteract climate change and air pollution, and stop the collapse of biodiversity, and so on. So the key words of ecosystem restoration are reimagine, recreate, and restore. I'll tell you more about what ESR a little later. The second section is called For Nature, and I'm calling it Know Your Nature, where I've selected only about 14 to 15 priority areas where UNEP and a lot of the development environmental agencies are working on. And I will just mention the areas, but out of these topics, in 3 areas, members of the family will share their expertise. However, if there's any particular topic that is of interest to you and you'd like to know more, please post your questions on chat. And Tisha and Tara have very kindly offered to note them down. And I'll make sure that I reach out to the right technical person, and revert with your answers on WhatsApp. The third section is called Build Back Better. It's the need of the times with the COVID pandemic. It's completely changed the whole world, global perspective. And it's also very critical to chart the roadmap and start building back better as we go forward. So one quick word before I request Tara to start my presentation. As I mentioned, the stunning photographs that I've used which match the themes of my subject are courtesy Devi. So thank you, Devi, for letting me use these wonderful photographs. Tara, may I request you to show my presentation, please? So the title of the session is Ecosystem Restoration. The three segments are ESR, for nature, build back better. And humans have learned to build back better from the best in nature. And this I've stolen from Ranu, and he'll tell you more about it if you ask him and if he has the time. And it's wonderful. I love the slides that he projects on this. I'd like to do a little quote. Tara, may I have the next slide? All living things on Earth are connected in the web of life. This is an amazing photograph by Devi. And I'd like to share a quote from Inger Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP Global. She says, we are intimately interconnected with nature, whether we like it or not. If we don't take care of nature, we can't take care of ourselves. And as we hurtle towards a population of 10 billion people on this planet, we need to go into this future armed with nature as our progress. What was that? Okay. My next slide, please, Tara. So ecosystem restoration. I've left the link there because there's a lot of material on ESR in the website, on the United Nations website, and be interesting. If you're interested, you can go to that. So I'll just briefly touch on what is ecosystem restoration, what factors of environment come under ESR, which ecosystems do they cover, does this decade cover, what are the aims and objectives, and what are the strategies to achieve that. So in the context of the UN decade, ecosystem restoration encompasses a wide continuum of environmental activities that contribute to two things. One is protecting the intact ecosystems, and the second is repairing degraded ecosystems. They're all linked strategically, as I mentioned, to the 17 SDGs to maintain consistency across the globe. And what is very important is that it touches the social, economic, and ecological context of each initiative, which will determine the appropriate balance of conservation and restoration. So what are the factors of environment that come under ESR? They're practically everything: restoring ecological processes, conserving biodiversity and flora and fauna, remediating polluted sites, combating climate change, ending poverty, improving livelihoods for everyone, improve the health of societies in rural and urban environments, increase the supplies of clean water and sustainable food. Sustainable food, incidentally, has become very much the flavor of times. We've done about 4 webinars on that, and we're going to be doing another one with Suvir. Adhere to principles of gender equality, which is very, very important. Gender equality and human rights is something which we have to keep in mind for whatever work we do on environment. Restorative justice, and respecting the human rights of all people living in these ecosystems. And which ecosystems are we talking about in this decade-long program? It is life below water, life on land, the world's geographical areas in totality. It's mountains, forests, wetlands, coastlines, oceans, farmlands, urban areas, grasslands, shrublands, peatlands, and so on and so forth, that it covers everything. So what are the aims and objectives of why have we launched the decade of ecosystem restoration? So ESR is an opportunity to turn the tide and give people and nature a sustainable future. And the United Nations General Assembly, I mean, it's been taken very, very seriously across the globe. Under Resolution 73/284, proclaimed 2020 to 2030 to be a part of the decade on ecosystem restoration, with the primary aim being to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide, transforming social, economic, and environmental systems, and improve relationships with nature, understanding its value and putting the value at heart of our decisions, whatever decisions we make, and make sure that the socio-economic development cannot be devoid of biodiversity conservation and ecosystem restoration. Now, this is all sounds like jargon, but then they have very meticulously gone into how we're going to do this, what is the strategy behind it, and I'll just explain to you what is the action that's going to be taken. You know, there has to be a system which covers all aspects of environment, covers global geographies, and the different kinds of people that live in these ecosystems. So what is the strategy to achieve it? The United Nations resolution requests that all member states will foster political will, which is we can't do without political will, mobilize resources, because we can't do any of this without funding, build capacities, again, we can't do without it, mainstream ecosystem restoration into national policies and plans, implement plans to protect and restore ecosystems, and undertake collaborative scientific research. Now, all this has to run through the governments and the systems that are around each member state of the United Nations. And the strategy has been put together through the process of consultation with governments, UN agencies, international and local NGOs, the private sector, academia, youth organizations, faith-based organizations. FBOs, incidentally, is a completely new segment that all development and environmental agencies are working in, because they have such a vast outreach. We work with Sri, and we work with Satguru, and so many of them, and they turn to us also. Human rights groups, youth organizations, farmers, grassroots organizations, and traditional leaderships. So basically, ESR is, it's time to make peace with nature. Can I have the next slide, please? So the second section of this session is Know Your Nature. So these are some of the main areas where UNEP is working, and a lot of the environmental agencies are working. One is, of course, COVID-19 response, how to deal with it. Resilience to disasters, environment and health, which we realized how intricately it's linked to environment. Plastics and marine litter is very much in the news, and I'll briefly touch on these subjects. Air pollution, I'm afraid Nitin is going to talk about it later. Wildlife and habitat protection, no points for guessing. It's going to be our very own Devi is going to talk about it. Sustainable technology in the urban space, Ranu Das, who's worked on this for years. And Build Back Better, Gen 4, Tara, Tishya, and Siddhant. Some of the other areas that are very important are resource efficiency and green economy, chemicals and hazardous waste, biodiversity and habitat conservation, sustainable agriculture, and Gen 4 will be talking about it, influencing behavior, South-South cooperation, and partnerships. So, resilience to disaster. So risks and disasters associated with the environment, such as climate change, flooding, heat wave, forest fires, and so on. However, COVID has shocked everyone, and scientists are working furiously to try and find answers. And of course, we have new questions and new answers every day. But there are two aspects of disaster management which have been brought to the forefront and in current times, which I'd like to bring to your notice. The first is COVID-19 pandemic is proof that health of the people and planet are deeply interconnected. About 60% of all infectious diseases in humans and 75% of all emerging infectious diseases are estimated to be zoonotic. Zoonosis are the diseases that are naturally transmitted between vertebrate animal and man. And there are over 300 zoonotic diseases that are reported from developed as well as developing countries of the world. And I think this pandemic has brought zoonotic diseases. I'm sure it will be included in the curriculum of human medicine to create awareness and symptoms and diagnosis and treatment and the control of zoonosis. The origin of COVID-19 is strongly linked to the disturbance of natural habitats, indicating the dysfunction between humans and nature. And the lines have been blurred between wilderness areas and human settlements. Earlier, it used to be just a human-animal conflict, but now it is even, that this sort of a blurring of lines has brought us closer to wildlife through zoonotic diseases such as COVID-19, which has become rampant. UNEP is working towards, we've taken a step back and we're working towards the status of biosecurity systems and measures to enable better readiness, early detection, and rapid response. These are the three things for zoonotic pathways and risks. The second disaster that has been brought to the forefront is illegal wildlife trade, which has shown that it can drastically affect our health and our economy. Not only does wildlife trafficking pose the second biggest threat to the survival of species after their habitat destruction, but also the recent pandemic has shown how swiftly it can cripple our economic infrastructure and development processes. So to deal with wildlife trade, we need greater capacity to implement and address the threats through enhanced knowledge of legal systems, illegal trade networks, procedures for prosecution and information sharing, emerging tools and technology to mitigate poaching and others. My current assignment in UNEP is incidentally on illegal trafficking. So one of the things that I've done that came off my desk are these two campaigns. One of them is called Not All Animals Migrate by Choice, and they're smuggled through the hotspots of trafficking, one of them being the airport. And this World Environment Day on 5th June, I launched another campaign called Stop Wildlife Trafficking. And it says, we've taken 5 species and we said, for example, rhinos are not your medicine. So one is called Not Your Medicine. Can we show the other one? Tara? Sad emojis. So sad emojis express the plight of these trafficked endangered species. So we've got the tiger, we've got the Indian barn owl. Devi told me very interestingly why they are trafficked. Indian pangolin, which are the anteaters. Their scales, they're eaten as meat also, and their scales are used for asthma and things like that. The Indian star tortoise, you'll be surprised, are one of the biggest, most popular pets. And the Indian bear is trafficked for its bile, which is supposed to be very good for gallbladder, etc. Next slide, please. So another very important area which is very much in the forefront of environmental action is marine and riverine pollution. How much time, Ranu, do I have? I have lost track of time. Ranu, do I have time?
Too much
Can I
left.
cover this? Sorry?
Not too much left, so I think you.
Another 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what the United Nations World Wildlife Fund and the other leading environmental agencies can do is that we can, of course, do research and studies. But what we also do is we do pilots in certain areas, and we prove a certain point or prove a certain success story, and then present it to the government, and then it's up to the government to actually execute it, because there's no way that we have either the funds or the capacity to do that. So UNEP has adopted a scientific approach to the challenge through a project called Countermeasures 1 and 2. Countermeasures 1 has been completed, and we are into Countermeasures 2. The funding has come from Norway, incidentally. And what do we do? So we map the citywide plastic waste hotspots, deepen the understanding of plastic leakage pathways and microplastic analysis. We have to collect data on constituents of plastic waste. Perception surveys were conducted to deepen understanding of how to manage this plastic waste. And of course, doing all this is working with the government and a wide spectrum of stakeholders. 4 cities were identified as hotspots: Haridwar for the Ganga, Agra for Yamuna, which was absolutely drastic, Allahabad for the confluence of the 3 rivers, and Mumbai for marine litter. I'd like to share a quick story with you. From 2006 to 2009, when I was with WWF, we cleaned up the Ganga for 169 kilometers from Narora to Garmukteshwar in UP. And we took all the stakeholders along the Ganga belt with us. The government, of course, industries that were dumping all their waste into the Ganga, fishermen who were doing illegal fishing, the villagers, the panchayats, the sadhus, it's the Mahabharat belt, school children to spread awareness, and so on and so forth. And the Gangetic River dolphin, which was critically threatened, doubled over the population actually doubled over the next 2-3 years that we were working there. And the river dolphins are very different to the happy, frolicking sea dolphins. They're shy, they're reticent, and they are blind. Over the years, they've gone, because of the pollution in the Ganga, they've gone blind. And even legend has it that when Ganga came out of Shivji's jata and she fell onto the earth, the first mammal that touched the earth was the dolphin. And therefore the dolphin is on top of the food chain. So they say that if there is a dolphin in your river, it's a living river. The last dolphin that was seen in the Yamuna was in 1961. So this work we did was in 2006, 2009. Well, we showed the government that Ganga can be cleaned. I don't know how many thousands and thousands of crores have gone into cleaning of Ganga. And it is only in 2020 the government has launched the Ganga Dolphin Program. So I'm going to stop here. And I'd just like to share a quick quote in the words of David Attenborough. Never has it been more important to understand how the natural world works and how to help it. And who better to tell us about wildlife and habitat protection than Devi. So Devi, it's over to you.
Thank you, Bobby. What a wonderful presentation you have given. And the entire aspect of wildlife, so-called wildlife and habitat, you have shown it to all of us in just 15-20 minutes. Good evening, everyone. And I would take only 10 minutes that is allotted to me. It's difficult to talk about environment in 10 minutes. So I would be only giving you some hard facts, very interesting statistics, and a few pictures so that you can appreciate what nature is all about. As I said, well, this is a misnomer. There is no wildlife. It is precious life and habitat. And as Gandhiji said once, that wildlife is decreasing in the forests and increasing in the urban areas. So true. The real wildlife is living in the urban areas. And can you imagine that the habitat protection, wildlife, environment, if all the trees were cut and all the marine fauna and flora was destroyed, because we understand money only. So how much money would be required to just get the oxygen for 6 months on this earth for doing all sorts of activities? And you would be surprised to know it is $800 trillion. $40 trillion would be required only for breathing by human beings if we cut all the trees. So we are destroying something which is available free of cost. Our trees, our environment, our marine fauna and flora. And that is what we are doing to nature, to everything around us. And that's very tragic. Because we understand everything in money terms, the entire world will go bankrupt in 1 year or 2 years' time if plants and everything stop producing theoretically oxygen. We have seen that it was a struggle to provide oxygen to few thousands in COVID pandemic. And someone has arranged oxygen for 7.5 billion people, humans. Leave aside the others. We have very little, care for other animals and other things which are directly connected with us. And if you see that we can't understand it fully because the earth, the life of the earth is 4.5 billion years and we only live for 100 years. So we never get the complete understanding of nature. That's why it's much more important to pay more attention to it rather than going in for unplanned and unthinkingly development, which is taking place everywhere. We are doing it out of innocence, out of ignorance. And should I tell you one thing, that just one example I'll give you. Elephants, as Bhabhi has told, see, this is what we are. elephants, I was trying to give you an example that elephants can hear by 4 methods. One through their trunk, one through their feet, one through their mind or cranial structure, and one through ear. And they can hear 8 kilometers away. And all 4 are processed, and then the information is coming to his brain. So if a tiger jumps 8 kilometers away, his feet catch that vibration and the trunk gets the smell and the picture is formed, and then he is able to hear that what is happening. That's why he is able to protect his babies. So there are research that we don't understand anything much about our animal world and the habitat around us. And that is what is taking us to this doomsday very fast. And you see this small elephant and the mother elephant going together. It's in Corbett. And as Bhabhi said, that everything is interdependent. There is nothing on this earth which is not connected with each other. And that we have to realize. And realize it fast, because human beings are digging their grave very, very fast, and they are feeling very happy about it. And as many of you have listened to these words, that climate change is there, environmental degradation is there. Actually, we are not fighting climate change. We are fighting selfishness, apathy, and greed. That is what we are fighting. In 1803, we were only 1 billion. And we became 2 billion in 1927. And now what happened in 120 years is now happening every 14 years. There are limited resources, and still the earth the nature can sustain us. But you see, as it's a famous saying goes, that there is lot available for everyone's need, but not for one man's greed. So it's the greed which is taking us to our doomsday, and that is what very, very tragic. And do you know how much carbon dioxide we are pumping into our environment? It is 50 billion tons a year. We have reached a stage where it would be difficult to take out the carbon away from the air and our water and our natural surroundings. So time is really running out as far as humans are concerned. And as Bhabhi said, that this pandemic has really shown that it is the wildlife, and the total neglect of the environment and poor understanding of our surroundings and living exclusively without caring for anybody else has led to all this. So all of us will have to come together and fight it. And it would start from individual's mind. It's not going to start, it's no government, no NGO, nothing, unless and until we control our mind, we control our greed, apathy, and selfishness. Things are not going to be very bright. And as I said, that we need to control our mind. The biggest pollution is not air pollution, water pollution, nature's pollution. It is the pollution of the human mind, which is becoming very dangerous. That we are self-obsessed, we are self-centered, we are absolutely not bothered about what is happening around us. And I would give you just one example. Amur falcon is a falcon which originates in China, Mongolia, comes to India at Nagaland, migration, it takes place, crosses Himalayas, and from here, cutting across Indian Ocean and Indian subcontinent, it goes to Africa, Somalia. We don't understand. In Nagaland, when Amur falcons, lakhs of Amur falcon come, people shoot them and feel very happy about it. Do you know that we will never be able to understand why birds migrate? But whatever little understanding we have got, that the conditions here are ripe for breeding. And when they reach Somalia, the eastern portion of the Africa, there the grasshoppers are breeding at that time. So if Amur falcon does not reach Somalia, the African countries on the east coast will have no crop production, and they would have to arrange food or die. This is a very small example which I have given, that everything is interlinked. There is nothing in isolation, but we have to understand that. And if I tell you in economic terms, just stop the slides, please. In economic terms, we have each person on this planet has an EMI of 150 crore on his head. We are bothered about EMIs of our home loans, car loans, God knows what loans. But this is an EMI due to nature. You have been inhaling 550 liters of oxygen every day without giving anything back to nature. And humans are the only living beings on this earth who extract from nature without giving back anything. You take trees, you take ants, you take birds, they give back everything to nature. They pollinate, insects. Human does not give anything except destruction. So we need to understand that we are so-called a superior race, which is absolutely self-obsessed. And would you please put these slides on for just 2-3 minutes? Yeah. So now I will just explain it to you just a few seconds. This is the fastest living being on earth. It is peregrine falcon. It flies at 310 kilometers per hour. Next, please. And this is how it looks like. This is Nanda Devi, India's highest peak, and Panchuli. This is a sky blue bird which comes during migration called verditer flycatcher. If you see it, you will love it. This is I photographed it in Delhi. Next, please. This is strawberry finch or red munia. As I told you, if you see this, you will forget all designs. You will forget everything. And then it's matching with Bhabhi's shirt. You know, it's absolutely looking like that. Next. Well, this is peacock pansy. Well, Britishers who are there, this is common jay. Such beautiful world of butterflies. They only live for 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. And they are so vital. They are indicators of very nice habitat, and they are so integral for pollination of plants, which we are not even aware of. And you know, Britishers had a very, very large empire, and they have named the butterflies. The soldiers have named the butterflies, and those names have stuck. This is like peacock pansy, chocolate pansy, and yellow pansy. These are the words. And then they gave, there was some fellow who is very, very dull. So it is called Babul dull Babul blue. And then they had somebody, you know, serving them. So they have common duffer. The name of the butterfly is common duffer, common leopard, common tiger, striped tiger. So it's a whole new world. You see the butterfly and they have named it in such an interesting fashion. And absolutely mesmerizing. This is Indian fritillary, which is very rare. This is only the 3rd sighting in Delhi when I was lucky enough to photograph it. And this is red Pero. It is in my house. The outside world, outside the open wings are different and closed wings are different. And this is the pollination going on. It's an absolutely mesmerizing world if you just pay attention to it. Next, please. And he came home, and no painter can make it. It is difficult to be a non-believer when you see these birds, when you see these animals. And we are unfortunately destroying their habitats and destroying them. We should stop it. Bees, it's a poppy with the pollination going on, and just see the beauty. If you see it under the microscope, you will never pluck a flower because it is killing like a living being. Next. Just look at him. This is I'm sharing for the first time. I have not shared this photograph anywhere else. This is spotted owlet. And do you know what we do? It is so called Vahan of Lakshmi. So during Diwali days and other days, people catch hold of it, slit his throat, so that all the Lakshmi, that is wealth, should remain in their house, should not go away, by sacrificing him, this poor chap. These are the superstitions, and those who are rich and powerful are absolutely responsible for all these myths that they are doing. So people are searching for owls, and the tantrics and all those are telling people that if you want to ward off your troubles, you sacrifice an owl. So whenever a picture is posted by bird watchers and animal lovers, we never disclose the location. Next, please. This is common starling. It is shining like a star. It comes from Eastern Europe to India and remains here for 3 months and goes back. If you see it once, you will be flabbergasted. That can something, who is the painter, who has painted it, means how nature has created such beautiful animals by millions and millions of years of hard work. And we are just destroying them. Next, please. This is Delhi. This is golden jackal. And the expression says it all. Next, please. And these are wonderful places to go. This is Corbett. It is full of oxygen. It is full of positivity. It gives you introspection. Once you go there, you would start loving the forests, and you would resist cutting any tree or branch. Next, please. Just go to these places, discover yourself, control your greed. That is what I always say. Next, please. This is also Corbett, those wonderful pictures. And at last, I would like to say, well, as I told you that we are digging our grave very, very fast and feeling very happy about it. We as human beings need to understand that we came last on the earth, and we have absolutely no right to kick others who were before us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devi. Besides those stunning photographs that you've shared with us, I think your depth of knowledge about wildlife is so amazing that I think 2 things emerge out of that. One is that we definitely have to do another session where you have to share your photographs and tell us more about it. And you've proved that environmentalists are really, really passionate about what they do. So the next speaker, cities are responsible for 75% of global CO2 emissions, with transport and buildings among the largest contributors, making city the key determinants in climate change. And to share his expertise on sustainable technology in the urban space is my ever supportive husband and brilliant husband, Ranu Das.
Right.
So over to you, Ranu.
Thank you, Madhur. And Devi, wow, that was absolutely phenomenal. I I'm glad you spoke about human greed and human stupidity and this completely unintelligent way that we live and control our world. So I'm going to take it from there. And but before that, really, this is a huge inflection moment in the history of our race, because I think the awareness of the environment and the and well of the movement, the momentum of the movement is picking up. So I think this is the time when we actually will take notice and do something. I can
Your sound is not very clear.
mind.
Yeah, your sound is not very clear. If you can come closer to the mic and speak clearly.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about actually building back better. We cannot discuss everything today, but just a little bit of my involvement with the environment and sustainability. I have, in my 5 decades of work, 3 decades of that has been on sustainable projects in energy, waste, carbon emissions, technology, water, air pollution, and more. And this I have experienced in many parts of the world, and I've worked in many parts of the world and all this. But sustainability means very different things to different people. It's so drastically different. I just give you an example. On a ship to the Antarctic in 2009, while we were crossing over the continent, I was giving a talk on the environment, and one of the couples, the elderly couples, raised their hand and said, we are very, very environmental conscious. I said, okay, where do you come from? Portland, Oregon, which is meant to be one of the better places in the US for the environment. So I said, yes. Well, what did you do for the environment? And they very seriously told me that, what, we decided to have a third car and we thought it should be a small car. So that is one of the approaches to the environment. Because, well, I guess it was more environment friendly that they went for a small car rather than a big car, but that was the mindset there. I was then giving a interview to Danish TV in 2012, and they asked me, so what do you think of the Copenhagen model? Now, the Copenhagen model is that 52% of the people in Copenhagen cycle to them. And they said, why don't we apply the Copenhagen model to India? So what I said to them was that, if I take the Copenhagen model to Ahmedabad, where 55% of the people cycle anyway, I would lose them immediately. So this was another perception. Basically, and I mentioned to them that, what, you have to become aware of sustainability once you have achieved a certain level of affluence, because before that, the aspirations that you move from a cycle to a motorcycle to a car and other things. So aspirations of the people in any environmental action has to be taken into consideration. So I'm going to talk about build back. First of all, we have to make fundamental choices, because the wrong choice today will actually lock us into a future that is maybe for 40 or 50 years. And this is going to be very damaging. If you start a coal-based plant, you're not going to shut it off. Otherwise, if you start you're locked into it for about 100 years and so on. And you cannot change it because normally with hugely vested interests of companies that are oil companies or car companies or rail companies, energy companies, and all of that. So we have to make fundamental choices. And let me put it into context. We have 8 billion, nearly 8 billion people on the planet today. Let's say that they make 20 choices a day. This is 160 billion choices a day. Are all these choices right? No. Important question is, how do you control these choices between right and wrong? Are you to make the right choice? Are you trained enough or educated enough? Are you responsible enough? Or are you a totally idiot who doesn't care? Can you be trained? Can you be influenced? If yes, how? Education, training, legislation, law enforcement, social media, these are all marginal solutions. So who's the judge of what is right or wrong? Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so what choices do you make? And the next slide also, please. How do you influence billions of people to make the right choice? If both are not illegal, the right and wrong, but there are wrong choices that are perfectly legal. I, I'll tell you about my choices. I have a longer shower than I need. I buy more clothes than I need to. I eat more food than I need to. Those are wrong choices, and I'm an environmental person. I'm a sustainable person. If I'm not going to change, chances are most of the billion people are not going to change. So, what is the way to do this? The way to do this, in my view, is to set default settings. What do I mean by default setting? Well, the pandemic was one kind of a default setting. You know, it forced us to change in a way that, for a brief period, it was very good for nature. This slide that you have, we live in our lives or in this maze. We are constantly making choices, left, right, straight, etc., and we don't know where we're going. But the idea is to set a default setting so that we are able to do this journey on the right-hand side of the screen, which is a controlled journey, which is a default setting that I was asked a question again in one of the Copenhagen lectures, whether to force a choice, is it democratic enough? Are you being non-democratic in not allowing people to make certain type of choices? So, this was a lady, and I said, listen, if you had to get some water, what would you do? Would you turn on a tap, or would you go to the river, or would you go to a well to draw the water? And I said, you'd open a tap, and that is a default setting. Is that a compromise on your right to make choices? No, it is just a default setting enables people to make the right choice. Another little story in Stockholm, which is Sweden is meant to be one of the most environmentally conscious countries. Everybody is now doing the 3 bins, you know, recyclable and so on, different colors. Even in Sweden, people shove Christmas trees, old Christmas trees into the wrong bins, clogging up the whole system. So people make wrong choices even in highly aware, environmentally conscious countries. It is therefore, what would be the default setting here? To be able to process the waste unsegregated. And there are technologies to do that. Rather than do the plastic separately and the recyclable separately and the food waste separately, just tackle the environment way, unsegregated way. The way the world is going to go. What are some of the other ways of default setting? In cities, you can ban cars from the city center. Pedestrianization, it improves the air quality dramatically. Road medians are default setting. People don't use the road unwisely. Access control roads are default setting. Carbon tax. In Singapore, if you need to buy a car, you would probably have to pay up to 100,000 Singapore dollars as a license to buy a car. And the more expensive the car is, the more expensive the license. This is a default setting. So let me move on to the next slide. Tara, would you put up the next slide, please? There is one of my heroes in the world is this guy, Jeffrey West. He is a biologist. He teaches biology in the and he was also one of the 100 more important people in the world. Jeffrey West, and I have met him several times, and we've spoken at the same conference. He created what is called the 240 law. It is a simple law, but it is also a law of nature. What this law says that the mass of every living thing if you double the weight of that little thing, of that living thing, into that species, you require only 75% more energy rather than double the energy. And this is a progression or line that holds true for all minutest of species, the insect, the ant, up to the elephant and the whale. Then he drew a parallel model thinking of whether he can convert this theory into other fields like urban development, like energy. So this is this biological law that he created, the three-quarters law, and he found out that if you double the population, you require only 75% more hospitals, 75% more petrol stations, 75% more police stations, 75% more energy, not 100%, not doubling. What does this show? This shows aggregation of demand. One of the best ways to sustain the environment is aggregate the demand and use the technology to provide that larger scale using economies of scale and energy saving. We are at the moment, the world is now 50% urban. By 2050, we will be 70% urban. There will be 40% increase in the cities. Do we need 40% more of everything? No, we don't. We need to follow this law. And this is especially true for the policymakers and government, that aggregation of demand. I mean, Chandigarh, you might think, is a lovely thing. It isn't, in my opinion, because the distribution of services, of power, of electricity, of water is so distributed and more expensive. The whole urbanization and satellite cities is very, very aggregate the demand. I want to give you a small example of what I did on this. Air conditioning, for example, or heating is a huge now, why do we need million air conditioners or 10 million air conditioners in the city? District heating or district cooling will save 40% energy. And it works in a few parts of the world. The first district energy plants I designed and constructed in the whole city. None of the rooms had air conditioners. The building had air conditioning plant. The city had air conditioning. And pipe poured water or pipe was piped into rooms and buildings. We need to make sustainable decisions like this.
Ranu, we can't hear you. You have to speak. Your voice is cracking. Your sound is not coming through.
Okay. 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 Anyway, I'm going to. Transportation, as Madhur said, is a huge emitter of.
We can't understand what you're saying. Everybody's messaging. We can't hear you and understand what you're saying.
Oh, is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I'm at the end of my presentation, but anyway, I will take another example. For example, in my area of work, which is mobility. In the last 100 years, 120 years, since the internal combustion engine started in 1905, we have ruined the planet. We build cities for cars. You'd be surprised that Los Angeles, for example, has 62% of total land area devoted to transport, 62%. It is car parks and stations and buses, and 62% is there. The standard should be about 25%. Kolkata has only 9%. Now, what does the car do? You use the car for only 5% of the time. And in the West, out of that 5%, 2% is spent on looking for parking spaces. So if you use your asset for only 3% of the time, it is ripe for disruption. And this is what is going to happen in mobility. Nobody 20 years from now, the three youngsters in the panel today will not have a car, will not drive a car. They will take a ride, and this is called mobility as a service. Cars are disappearing. The managing director of Daimler-Benz said 2 years ago, all car companies are going to go bankrupt. This is the disruption that is happening, and thankfully, new fuels are happening, electric mobility, hydrogen mobility, rather than the internal combustion engine, which has virtually destroyed our planet. So listen, if you are going to buy a car, number one, don't buy a car. Use a Uber or use a Ola. Buy a ride, don't buy a car. And the other thing is, if you buy a car, buy an electric car or buy a hydrogen fuel cell car. These are the right decisions that need to be made for every little element of our life. And well, that's it. That's all I have to say. I've said my piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranu. Every time you speak, quite a bit at least goes over my head. I don't know about the others. And after every time Ranu gives a talk, I have to sit down with him and say, okay, so explain this to me and explain that to me. But I'm sure that everybody is understood and will probably ask you a lot of questions, which will be great. So now we have 3 of Gen 4 from our family discussing environmental issues that need to be reimagined, recreated, and restored, and how we can build back better. So over to Tara, Tishya, and Siddhant.
Well, I must start off by saying the presentations so far have been nothing short of fantastic. And I want to thank you, Madhur Nani and Ranu Nana, for selecting such an important topic this week and for allowing people of my generation, which I'm told is Gen 4 of our family, to share your thoughts on it. So as the human population grows exponentially, so does the threat of climate change. Unsustainable development is rapidly degrading Earth's capacity to sustain human well-being. Current social, economic, and financial systems fail to account for the essential benefits we get from nature and to provide incentives to manage ecosystems and natural capital wisely. Around a quarter of global diseases stem from environmental-related risks, including animal-borne diseases, such as the most recent COVID-19, climate change, and exposure to pollution and toxic chemicals. So environmental risks such as heat waves, flooding, drought, and pollution hamper efforts to make cities and other human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Oh, I just realized that I've been muted. I'm so sorry.
We could hear you, Siddhant. We could hear you.
Oh, you could?
Yeah, just continue.
It was just the last. Continue.
Oh, okay. Sorry, where did I break? Sorry.
No, you can just continue. We could hear. It just was for a quarter of
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So all members of this family, whether they're in India or the US, are experiencing the disastrous effects of climate change. Earth's interrelated environmental emergencies must be addressed together in order for us to build back better. So on the note of addressing emergencies together, how has the current pandemic impacted waste disposal?
So I would love to answer that question. And I think one of the most important and defining factors of COVID-19 has been the sheer amount of medical waste, because whether it's masks, whether it's vaccine cases, whether like anything that you can think of, it's being thrown into the environment. So I think the amount of plastic that has been and that has entered the environment during the last 1.5 years has been quite overwhelming for our ecosystem. And I think that needs to be addressed as soon as possible when things at a point where our attention can span to that. And one of the things that I find particularly important is the need for an organization of facilities that can handle this waste should a sudden crisis situation come in the future. Because this time we were clearly underprepared. And I think most countries have suffered this, whether their populations are small or large, whether they have vast spans of land free or not, because at the end of the day, they are being dumped into the environment. So I hope governments in the future of various countries take action as soon as possible to put in place systems for crisis situations in the future, whether medical or of any other nature, because they all end up harming our environment. And that being said, the contamination of the environment with medical waste has impacts on wildlife, on soil, on groundwater, and all of these also come to us, needless to say, the animals that surround us. So human spillover into natural habitats has also resulted in wildlife problems in terms of populations. And Tisha is particularly interested in these ideas. So I think.
Okay, hi. So, as Tara was saying, habitat loss and fragmentation are actually big causes for human and wildlife species interaction. And this is damaging not only to the creatures around us, but to us as well, because these interactions often diminish animal gene pools and make wildlife populations way more susceptible to diseases. And a result of this is actually that we become more at risk to getting zoonotic diseases. And so practices like unsustainable agricultural intensification, increased infrastructure development, increased movement of people to increasing places, all of these things are causes of not only wildlife deterioration, but as a consequence of that, human deterioration as well.
And I imagine this would be related to the pandemic as well.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we know that, as Madhur Nani mentioned, the COVID pandemic itself is also a zoonotic disease and it originated from animals. And the thing is that this is not the first time we've seen a zoonotic disease have such a big impact on human populations. SARS, Ebola, bird flu, all of these are also diseases that were transmitted from mammals and birds to human beings. And I feel like we really need to realize that this direct uncontrolled contact between people and animal species, because of the wildlife trade and because of this increased human and livestock and wildlife interaction, are really big factors that contribute to the spread of zoonotic diseases and such big disruptions on like a global scale. And I feel like the pandemic has kind of brought to the forefront just how damaging the wildlife trade can be. And even though governments are making more efforts to tackle this industry now, it's still disheartening to see that the efforts take so long, because even as I speak right now, the incredibly cruel Yulin dog meat festival is going on in China. And I think that when you think of things like this, we have to realize that we need to reevaluate not just our relationship with nature as a resource for human beings to benefit from, but also our perception towards nature and wildlife and animals as something as less valuable as human beings. We need to realize that these are equally important to our planet's sustenance, if not more important.
Yeah, and I think the UN Secretary General had recently mentioned in one of his speeches that COVID recovery and our planet's repair must be two sides of the same coin. So, what exactly would this repair look like?
I think is by the way, I've shut my video because our Wi-Fi seemed to be glitching, so I hope that's not an issue. But repair, especially in the context of as we recover from COVID, entails all realms of society, the economy, and the environment. And they're all interconnected, in fact, and that's how we have to increasingly see our surroundings. The environment can't be separate from the economy. And as we repair from COVID and the lull that the economy has seen, we have to make sure that programs and schemes that benefit, say, farmers and other people who have been affected to a great degree economically also include the environmental consequences, and they aren't separate from one another. And to make this repair more efficient, we have to shift our values and worldviews as well as our financial and economic systems. We must adopt an approach that includes the whole of society. Um, and this doesn't mean that I'm sorry, I'm very good. And this doesn't mean that we just focus on the people who have been impacted either medically or economic whole approach of society. Important part coming from the repair lens is that the emotional and personal aspect of COVID-19 that has been extremely difficult for all of us. And I think neglecting this human lens, so to say, isn't particularly beneficial either, because at the end of the day, we are all impacted by this. However, we must see that all of our strategies to cope, whether they're personal or as a society, must take into account the environment. So on that note, I hope all of us here can take 15 or 20 minutes a day to make sure we're at a good headspace and we're feeling okay. And beyond that, we, of course, don't neglect our environment and make sure that everything around us is sound too. So as we move forward through this period of repair, the question of what future actions must be taken arises. Siddhant, what do you think some key actions for the future could be?
Yeah, so echoing what Madhur Nani mentioned earlier, the ESR goals, I do believe we need to recreate, reimagine, and restore. So by bringing together the latest scientific evidence, we need to show the impacts and threats of the climate emergency, the biodiversity crisis, and the pollution that kills millions of people every year. And as part of medical and humanitarian efforts, we need to improve analysis. We need to improve analysis and capacity on managing medical waste and focus on resource efficiency. We also need to build a sustainable economy driven by renewable energy and nature-based solutions. And this will create new jobs, cleaner infrastructure for a resilient future. For this, we must also encourage economic actors to invest in building back better and link recovery efforts with clean alternative technologies.
Since Tara was talking a little bit about the human lens and then Siddhant was talking about, future action, I feel like it's also important, I guess, to introspect, especially after the second wave just hit, about how we've been impacted and about how especially our generation, Gen 4, will have a big say in the shift in the future to a more environmentally friendly perspective in a way that's more than just economic or technological even. I mean, when the second wave was going on, we were all so impacted, not only physically, but also mentally. And I think it was really heartening amongst all that suffering, even to see that there were so many people in our generation, including people I know, who were using social media as a tool to save lives and share resources and assistance and pleas, and offering spaces for their friends and peers to kind of talk and discuss any problems they were having throughout this period. And I guess one thing that I really feel proud about being in Gen 4 for is that we have this sense of social responsibility, I think, and a sense of unity when it comes to tackling such global problems. And that honestly makes me very, very confident to see change in the future coming, maybe especially from us.
So I think as we build back better, two important forms of responsibility arise. And I'll be talking about individual responsibility, and Tisha will be talking about corporate responsibility, both of which go hand in hand to a high degree. So I think something that a lot of us tend to think is that some actions that we may take are too small. But it's not true, because even the smallest things like having discussions, opening the minds of people around you to alternative and more sustainable possibilities are extremely crucial. And this entails the social aspect of Build Back Better that we spoke about in the introduction. So whether it's talking to people, whether it's making them aware of the crises that are at hand in all realms of the environment, those are all vehicles to spread the message of the crisis that we are in today. And in small using cloth bags, composting at home, all of being aware of what goes into the products, as Mother Nani also touched upon. These are all small changes that won't really make your life harder. They'll in fact make it easier and probably more wholesome for your body. So if all of us choose to take on these changes, I'm pretty sure slowly our impact would also increase and our engagement with the environment would increase too. So I think all of us need to remember that no measure is too small and whatever we can undertake must be undertaken. And over to Tisha to discuss a bit about corporate responsibility.
Yeah, so this will be very brief and it ties in really well with individual responsibility. I think that as social media and there has spread and there's been so much more awareness on, the policies and the practices of bigger corporations when it comes to the environment, it's important for consumers as well, consumers like us, to push corporations to change their own values and policies by, carrying out research and seeing what products are damaging, because at the end of the day, while individual responsibility is crucial, it is big industries as well that cause a lot of the pollution around us. So combining individual and corporate responsibility is a really powerful tool to kind of help prevent further damage.
Yeah, great point, Tish. And I think our session is, I think our part of the session is over now. And once again, I'd like to thank Yanu Nana and Madhur Nani for organizing today's call. I think as Gen 4 and Gen Z in the greater scheme of things, we have the responsibility to sensitize not only our generation, but the generations after us. So thank you once again for giving our generation the opportunity to voice our thoughts and opinions on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gen 4, Tara, Tisha, and Siddhant. This was a very well-researched, informed, and animated discussion. And it certainly made us feel very confident that we're leaving the planet in very capable and responsible hands for the future. So before I thank everybody, I'd like to open the floor a little bit for comments and encouragement to Gen 4 on Build Back Better. And if anybody would like to comment, since we have a little time, it will be very nice.
I have a comment, Tisha. I was very impressed with your knowledge about the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. It is quite amazing because not many people know about it, but that is a city that I've bypassed primarily because of this festival. So I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Madhur, I have something. Sorry.
Yes, certainly.
Have you completed?
Go ahead. Hello. Can I ask a question, Madhur?
Yeah, yes, certainly. You're breaking up, Meena Gigi.
Maybe you can put it in the chat box.
Yeah.
Veena Gigi, you're frozen and your voice is not coming through. Okay, so would you like to put it in the chat box and we'll sort of note it down. Okay, is that any other comments, or can I thank everybody? Okay. So I'd like to first thank Chand for that wonderful introduction. Devi, speaking so passionately. Ranu, as usual, brilliant. And Gen 4, Tara, Tisha, and Siddhant. And all of you family for giving us your precious time. Now it's over to Ranu for the conclusion.
I am told that you couldn't understand me, and I don't know why. Because I was speaking loudly and into the mic, but anyway, c'est la vie. The other talks were wonderful. And as Madhur said, I'm so impressed with you three that it's quite amazing. As she said, that we leave the planet in good hands. And this is what gives me hope. I spoke about inflection point, which is happening right now. And this is the time to change the world because everybody is in the mood to change it. And Devi, that was a spectacular show and talk. And thank you so much. You're always so engaging. And And of course, Madhur brought all her experience for the last, 13, 14 years in the field of environment. And that was wonderful.
Ranu, I want to interfere.
Yes, please.
Are you concluding? We got out disconnected, you know. But can I say something before you conclude?
Please go ahead, Veena Jiji.
I just want to compliment everybody for a fantastic discussion. And I'm a real environmentalist at heart. So what Madhur suggested, that we need some more, in other sessions to expand on this. However, I really want to congratulate the Gen 4 for participating, and let's hope more come in future to participate. And thank you so much. That's what I wanted to say personally before you close.
And okay, thank you, Veena Jiji. And Tara, don't forget to show my last slide.
Oh.
Oh, that's a good one.
How lovely is that?
Wonderful.
Cute. So this is a very interesting photograph by Mohit Midha. He was saying that all the entire herd was actually sort of all over the place, and then he started clicking them, and slowly the two matriarchs kind of assembled the whole family, and then they actually locked their trunks to protect the little ones in between. So I thought it was a nice one to say, united we stand with the family.
Yeah.
I also want to add, Mother Mami and Devi Mossa, that, if there are any campaigns, interventions where we can contribute, I think it would be wonderful to, use this platform also to galvanize a lot of us who would like to make some difference. So, I think that could be a great follow-up kind of intervention from this conversation.
I think that's a great idea, Gogi. That's a great idea.
Great, yeah, absolutely, Gogi. And I'm just coming in because, we are staying in a hotel room and Sumant was on a call. So I was on mute. Just want to say, lovely presentation, Madhur Mami and Ranu Mama, Devi Mossa, amazing photographs. I think we need to have an exhibition where we can just keep coming and seeing all these fantastic photographs, and your exhibitions must have a recorded narrative because that's what made this really great. I had a question and fantastic job, Tara, Tisha, and Siddhant. It was really lovely to see all of you, kind of having a conversation. Do you have a grievance against all of us, like Generation 3 to who are on this call? I mean, you couldn't not have one. So if you could go turn by turn and pick up your top most kind of grievance to state here, we'll probably be more responsible as we live the rest of our lives.
And don't
Charlie, great one.
hesitate to speak in the same language of Greta.
Yeah, go for it, guys. You don't get this opportunity.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I don't mind going first, but it doesn't, I think it spans beyond our family. I don't think it really applies to our family, but I think as was mentioned in the presentation as well, a large aspect of environmental degradation comes also from old traditions that aren't being lost. And especially wildlife is affected so greatly. And even Tisha spoke about the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. And there's an insane amount of festivals like that, even sacrifices that take place. Realistically, we can't go without any of this happening, but it continues to pervade society because that's what we have known for so many generations. So I don't know if it's something that can change in a matter of a generation, but that's something I hope to see changing as we move forward.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I guess I can go next. I think it's along the same line. So as much as I'm thankful to the generations before me for all that they've given us and built for us, I also feel like as we move forward, we do see change, and we see change in the way we think about things culturally, socially, even politically. And I think something that I notice is there's a lot of restraint at times and that restraint can, I guess, become harmful as we develop our own thoughts and things and our own opinions and things, and definitely like even when we're taking action, especially for an issue like climate change, we see a lot of restraint from maybe older political leaders, and that sort of restraint, I feel like it needs to it's really like harmful for I guess our generation to progress. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess what I was thinking is kind of similar to what Siddhant said, which is that one thing that is not really fixable necessarily, but one thing that I've always felt really, I guess, as you said, I've had a grievance for is the fact that I feel like our generation is a lot more proactive when, when they see a problem, they kind of identify it and they take action immediately. But I feel like a lot of where we're at right now is also because action wasn't taken sooner and people didn't do anything. I think people, even though there wasn't as much awareness, there was an awareness about environmental degradation and what we're doing to the planet. And while that conversation took place, I don't think it necessarily translated into action. And like Siddhant said, even right now, it's often really frustrating to see that our generation has so much to offer, I think, and so much that they want to do for the planet. But at the end of the day, we are still at a point in our lives where, we have education and when we maybe don't have as much power to make change. And it's really frustrating to see that there are so many people who do have that power, and there are so many people maybe like who have the political power as well to do so much for the environment, but they either do nothing or they do things that actually impact the environment in
I'm
a
going to ask some questions.
bad way. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to ask some one or two questions, if I may.
Please go ahead.
Yes, please. So, it was terrific, very educative. It was very mesmerizing. So my questions are to the entire panel. And I'd really like Devi and Madhur Mosi and the younger generation to respond, because this is also an intergenerational matrix. And it's also about the UN diplomacy. It's about Devi and being a preserver of the treasures of precious life, and the younger generation, which has been educated to appreciate nature. So my first question is, this whole vegetarianism, non-vegetarianism debate and this balance of nature debate, this comes up recurrently in school classrooms. And on the one hand, we talk about preservation of wildlife, but on the other hand, we are also experiencing rabid and rampant non-vegetarianism. So I want to know your views on this. That's the first issue. The second issue which I want to ask you, and this is for the younger generation particularly, and for you, Madhur Mosi, since you work for the UN, do you have an intersectoral convergence with education for environmental awareness also as part of UN diplomacy and the UN mission? And Tisha, Tara, and Siddhant, I'd like you to tell me very honestly, because you went to school in Delhi. Siddhant, you did many years in Delhi as well. You went to very good schools. You went to these upper class, high-end schools where, you were taught about environment and wildlife. But tell me, is there some fault in our science curriculum, in our EVS teaching at the fundamental level up to class 5? And what do you think should be done so that there is an automatic appreciation for nature? So please answer my questions.
Yeah, Tisha, go ahead.
So I was thinking I could respond to two questions. The first is the one about non-vegetarianism versus vegetarianism. So I personally am vegetarian because, this exact issue. But I also think that the entire debate about vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism is also quite confined to a Western world perspective, or a perspective where we're very separated from nature, like all of us are. So if you look at eggs and chicken and all those things, those are all products of the agribusiness and factory farming. So they're actually very harmful for the environment. And the way that they're sourced to us is really deteriorating the environment. So for us to be non-vegetarian and then claim to be environmentalists and all those things, it's not just about the life of an animal, it's about the fact that it is one of the largest drivers of climate change. But I also think that if you look at local consumption, there's often, at least as far as I've seen, there's a lot of instances of people who call themselves environmentalists who try and get locals to kind of become vegetarian. And I think in those situations, we also have to be able to differentiate between overconsumption and sustainable consumption, because as consumers, we are all big over consumers, and we don't necessarily need those things to survive. I could survive without egg because there are so many other options available to me. But if you go to a fisherman in the middle of a coastal village, you can't force someone in that situation to become a vegetarian, because over there, very often they're carrying out sustainable practices and they need those things to survive. So I feel like having that distinction is really important. But for people who come from cities like all of us, and the lives that we do, I think that in that situation it's really important to try, if not becoming vegetarian, because I think that that is strangely hard for some people, but it's really important to try and minimize how much you eat when it comes to vegetarian food. I think that a lot of people, they say, oh, I can't become vegetarian because it's too hard, and then they just remain hardcore non-veg people, when there's also like a big space in the middle. I mean, you don't have to necessarily say I'll only eat vegetarian food or only eat non-vegetarian food. The point is to try your best as a consumer and minimize what you don't need. So I think that saying vegetarianism versus non-vegetarianism is not necessarily the way to go, but saying essential food versus non-essential food is a better way to think about it.
So, Namita, to answer your question, two things. One is, of course, sustainable food. Sustainable food has become a very much on the front burner where United Nations is concerned. But as Tishia rightly said, that it's more Paris and the global countries who are talking about sustainable food. But recently, there have been two very interesting webinars on this, which I'll put it out onto the family group. And it gives a lot of very valid, information. And I think one of the strengths of the ecosystem restoration program that the decade that UN has launched is that the basic foundation for that is policy and advocacy. Because without that and influencing, the member states, the political decisions, and then carrying it through is one of the biggest criteria on the strategy of how to implement it. And that covers all aspects of environment, including sustainable food. So that I'll put that. As far as education for sustainable development is concerned, UNEP is still small. We are 3.5 years old in India. And somehow we haven't had ESD as a core program within our system, but we associate a lot with the other agencies who have them. For example, WWF has one of the biggest divisions is ESD, within their programs. And we have a program called the Tide Turners. Yes, we have several programs which also work with the government, because government has a very large eco club systems and the NCC and so on and so forth. So we have a program called Tide Turners, where we've again partnered with the CEE, with the WWF, and and other developmental agencies to reach out to the youth. But it's more plastic, single-use plastic oriented. But it's a beginning. But having said that, yes, we could do a lot more in ESD as far as we're concerned.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I can also address one of the questions you'd asked regarding like just how my education was in terms of like how my environmental education was. And I mean, the school I was at, which I think Dara and Tisha were at too, the Shriram school, they did a very good job from a pretty young age of educating us about climate change and environmental conservation. I think they had a very strong program in that. And I think when we were younger, maybe climate change wasn't it was as big of an issue, but it wasn't as people weren't as publicly aware about it. And so I feel like now I hope that like secondary school institutions are able to like provide their students with a lot more information about these issues. And I think another thing is like giving these students a platform to take action. I feel like that's very important as well. And I hope that like schools are starting to do that more too.
Thanks. And one thing, Ranu Chacha, you were talking about a society where you hope by the 5th generation, or when this 4th generation also grows up further, we will have fewer cars. But you know, in our society, having a fleet of cars and the kind of car you have is symbolic of a kind of power hegemony. So, you know, in inequitous societies, how would you address this issue? Would you be able to change mindsets adequately? And what are you doing in that direction? I'd like to know.
Well, Namita, if a car takes you 1 hour to go from one place to the other, and an alternate system takes you only 10 minutes, and you don't have to go through traffic jams or congestion and pollution, no matter how rich you are, what would you prefer? There are still people who would like their Lamborghinis, and they're welcome to that, right? But the bulk of the people would prefer a transit that removes what I call the anxiety of mobility. Anxiety of mobility is if you have to go somewhere after a day or two, you start planning now as to which route you're going to take and how you're going to get there, and still you don't make it in time. You're either too early or you're too late. So the car is the best before date has happened for the car. Absolutely. What is going to happen, and as I said, that if you use your asset for only 3 to 5% of the time, in any industry, that asset is ripe for disruption. In any industry. So I think it is going to be, and you ask your brother, Chand, he uses Uber and he uses Ola. I think when he came to Delhi, he didn't have a car and he was fine. So you buy a ride, you don't buy a car. I think this transformation is beginning to happen. This is called mobility as a service. So you provide the service.
But it's very complex in our society because, you know, the metro, the Delhi metro is a case in point, Ranu Chacha. I was a metro user. I came to the university by the metro. But I was, I'm more sort of leftist in my orientation. So I'm happy traveling with the common man. But a lot of my colleagues were not happy traveling with the common man. And they went back to using their cars, etc., despite the fact that they had to withstand traffic jams and hire drivers, take much longer time, because they felt ki hai hum aam aadmi ke sath kaise jayenge, and they're smelly and they sweat and this, you know, they actually raked up such issues. So that's what I said, it's about mindsets also.
No,
if you invited me to a party, I would not come in a metro to your party because I would be all togged up and dressed up and coming to a party to your house. I would in any case, hire a cab or use my car or something. So that's the issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Also in India, Ranu Mama, sorry if I could add that I think safety is an issue for, young women. And we really have to address it if we want this to be a fair transition, for both genders.
To address the elite versus Aam Aadmi issue that you raised, in Singapore, you would still use public transport or a taxi. You would not drive a car. In Hong Kong, you would do the same, right? It is just in India. And as I said, those 5 or 10% of the guys who still want to show how wealthy they are are welcome to Lamborghinis and all of that. But basically, if an alternative comes, and I'm not talking about crowded metros and standing and holding on to railings and crowded cheek by jowl kind of travel, which is unsafe in any case in this pandemic area. But there are many, many things that are coming, which are personal and private and yet public. This perception of that public transport is for the poor, and therefore I will not travel in it, right, is changing because new modes of transit are coming. And we can have another discussion on that, which is actually public transport, but in a private mode. So that the women's safety that you spoke about, Vaishali, it is monitored by a control room. And if anything happens, it is immediately reported to the police. And before the guy reaches the journey, it is informed. or if a person is ill or sick with COVID or something like that, you can monitor the temperature in the vehicle and inform the passenger that you're sick. Are you okay? Do you want us to override this car to a hospital or something like that? These forms of transportation are coming. The mother can put the children in a car like this, and the car will go only to the school, and the doors will open only to the school. These are the transport that people are working on at the moment. And this is and it's available. The technology is available, and it's going to happen very soon. So I think this perception of Aam Aadmi versus elite, and therefore I prefer to use my Lamborghini is I think on its way out. Because really, if you what's the point of having a car that can go 300 kilometers per hour when you're traveling only 10 or 15 kilometers per hour in a traffic jam?
Chalu, we'll hope and wait for this. Yeah, great.
And Namita Didi, as you're in the education policy area, I'd also like to just make one quick point that, you know, what is being taught in school versus what's being done in families, there's a huge gap. So you may teach what you're teaching. And so we are learning actually from our kids a lot in terms of what we should do. But if schools can have projects, so I know Siddhant was in a project in his current school where he interviewed us for something. So he engaged us. So perhaps we should think of ways in which we can have more practical projects where schools can also engage to the extent it's possible, the larger families, so that that engagement is slightly wider and the change which is expected is also, I guess, more engaged so that, you know, it's all real stuff and not theoretical stuff.
Yeah, actually, it should become a watershed movement. In my view, it should be a watershed movement.
Vaishali, it was a wonderful question that you posed to the kids. That is there a complaint? I think that led to some wonderful discussion. Right? Chand.
Yes, Ranu Chacha. I think
you want to wind up or do you want to continue?
Oh, I think we should wind up. It's nearly 8 o'clock. Okay. And so would you like to sort of invite suggestions maybe on the WhatsApp group for sessions for season 2? Yes. So we have some starting ideas, but it would be good to invite suggestions from the group too.
So basically, we're starting the season 2 of FTG in the last week of August. That is the plan. And it'll go on till April, the end of April in 2022. Where at the moment, Chand and I are working on topics of what we might approach in season 2. The other thing is that I have discussed with him is that there is unequal representation of the clans. There are 12 clans in the family, and some of the clans are not represented or underrepresented. And therefore, I think what we need to have more people from these clans. And we need to have more youngsters as well, because we have today seen what they're capable of, and we need to encourage this more. And I and Chand need some ideas. What are the topics? We have another 2 months left. Yeah, it takes a month to prepare these things. Use the family discussion group to list the topics and speakers. I mean, if I could persuade Mona to lead a session, who has never spoken in her life before, and she did such a wonderful job. You know, this is what the family discussion is all about.
Ranu Ma'am, I want to give you some feedback from Gen 4. Last night we were returning from party very late at night. It was midnight. Siddhant had this session, and so my daughter was telling one of our friends that, we have this so everybody was like, why are you getting up on a Sunday morning so early? I mean, how could you have a, kind of a Zoom call, and what is it all about? And so Tarushi was like, we have this family and they know their stuff and they get together and discuss it. So there was a sense of pride, associated with what. So even if they are not engaged as often, but they are feeling this cerebral conversation and all of this which is going on. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing. So
What is it that you?
I also think that family histories and legacies would be very appealing to all of us because, you know, those are treasure chests. And we've all realized how important it is to get to our origins. History's already taught us that we have to unpack our origins. So I think a lot more sessions could be on family stories, family histories. You know, we have a Varma group, Madhur Mausi is on that. We were on it yesterday. And they were unpacking the family gathas. And it was really nice for us to know what are, you know, like what Atma Prakash Pupaji used to tell Nirmala Buaji, or what Rajeshwari Pupaji was all about, and even further, what Babuji was all about, etc. So, I mean, I really want one segment to be devoted to this. Other can be issue-based, and we have done a lot of issue-based stuff. So this is just a suggestion.
Good. That's wonderful.
Right. You need to do, whoever is on the group, I think you need to speak to the people in the clan of Munni Buaji, because nobody from that clan has come forward. You need to speak to Nirmala Buaji's clan because they're underrepresented. And Raju is here, or he's left. So Balbir Tauji's clan also needs to be a little more represented so that we can have a more even discovery of the family. Because I'm really enjoying this, by the way.
Yeah. Ranu Mama, also sorry to interrupt you, but you know, in addition to these conversations, I know you're doing some, you know, you're putting them on YouTube, but also I think podcasts, etc., very well sort of in the younger generation connects with those tools as well. So as you are at it, I just a suggestion, happy to help in any way, but that'll be quite effective because you can fast forward, listen to all of these conversations like Namita Didi talked about family. I think at some point it'll be very interesting for the kids to, you know, understand who we are and where we come from as well. So yeah, thanks.
Oh, no, absolutely wonderful. And no, I mean, let's get as many suggestions as possible, please, because this is very important. I want to archive this body of knowledge so that this is carried on over the next 15 years, 20 years, when some of us are no longer there. And, you know, at the moment we struggle to find out, okay, what was Babuji doing? You know, what was Mishri Lal doing? Because we have very small snippets of information and one document here and one document there. And this is so sad. And, you know, this body of knowledge will I hope, be remembered 30, 40 years from now of what we're doing.
And to add to what Namita said, is that in the Varma family clan, we call it the Happy Clan. You know, we had the serious, sort of readings of what have been written by, you know, the older generation and so on and so forth. But we also have interesting stories, you know, which are fun to listen to, which we didn't know, and they bring out the personality, like Namita said that, you know, or you said that, you know, what Atma Prakash Pupa and Nirmala Buaji talked about. You know, the family can come up with interesting stories. It reveals more about what they were like, and it's very interesting to know. And so we tell stories also which are personal to some extent and or more experience oriented. So something like that also would be great fun to do.
Yeah. Let's come up with as many ideas. You know, some of this will easily be done. Some people might not agree with some ideas, but let's post them on the family discussion group.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Dan and Devi and Mother, well done. Bye.
Well done. Well done. Great show. Thank you.
Thank you.